Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to the Cultural Studies podcast. My name is Toby Miller, and my guest today is,
Wendy Haslem from the University of Melbourne in Screen Studies.
well, Prof. Haslam. Thank you so much for being with us. And you've got books and artworks behind you. And under the artworks, is that a piano or am I misunderstanding? Is that a keyboard?
It is a keyboard, Toby. So, actually, about a year ago today, I started to learn piano. So,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
terrible, but I'm learning songs that I like, and it makes it fun. And yeah, a neighbor actually said to me that learning piano will add a new dimension to your life. And that's absolutely true. There's a little frustration and there's a lot to learn, but I'm really loving it.
Congratulations, that's wonderful. So listen, I wonder if you'd share with us today, perhaps not a piano solo unless you're so inclined. Tell us what, shake of the head. Tell us what's currently dynamizing, preoccupying, interesting, impeding you. What's going on for the prof?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So I'm going to step back and just say thank you for the invitation, Toby, as well, and also acknowledge the impact of your work on our work as well, which has been really significant and important for us. I've actually got film and theory on my desk always. So thank you for that. Currently,
Well, yes.
I,
Now, a lot of that is thanks to Bob Stam, it should be said.
okay, Robert Stan
Thank
as
you
well.
anyway.
That's a pleasure. Um, I think it's important to acknowledge that as well. But currently, I've actually been on sabbatical this last semester,
Hmm.
and I have been happily and very luckily and gratefully, and that has given me time to work towards the finalization of a new book. So, the
Ah,
new book really is on vision, and it's on vision and the cinema, but it's also on vision, hoping to really reveal some hidden ways that vision has been conceptualized across the history, certainly of Western thought. So I'm going all the way back to the beginnings of the conceptualization of vision in terms of the elements. So I'm writing about vision and fire, vision and light, vision and air as well. And I'm exploring Greek mythology, so the idea of vision being created by a combination of, earth, air, and fire itself, but also vision emerging from ideas around, how fire and interocular fire may be conceptualized to have, to light up every morning when we wake up as a way of allowing light, internal light to meet external light, allowing us to see. So the connections to early histories of optics are inclusive of Greek mythology and certainly Greek philosophy, but I'm also very interested in ideas coming out of the Islamic Golden Age as well. So writers like and theorists actually like Al-Kindi, who did a lot of translation and thought about vision in terms of geometry and thinking about vision in terms of objects and light and how we actually see. So ideas about vision, including, the projection of light rays from our eyes as one conceptualization of early thought about vision, the idea of objects kind of gathering light and projecting it back into our eyes as well. So, this is a project that really wants to illuminate some of those hidden histories, particularly the Golden Age, the Islamic Golden Age histories, but bring it into alignment and consideration with cinema. So, the work that I've done in cinema and my research has been dedicated often to silent film, early film, and looking at early film through contemporary cinema. So my early work on spectral projections from Méliès to new media was really about how new media contains the presence of early film as well. So I wrote about things like cue marks in early films, in a film that you will have seen called Detour. Watching that on a digital screen are replete with all of the kind of, scratches and abrasions and cigarette burn cue marks that are marks of the materiality of the celluloid film itself. I'm interested in kind of exploring earlier film by looking at more contemporary film. And this book also begins there as well. So this book begins with consideration of Kelly Reichardt's film, The Mastermind, which I wonder if you've
Hmm.
seen.
Hmm.
And just that early scene of the consideration of a theft in an art gallery, the way that the character's framed, the way that he is able to steal an object from an art gallery without being seen, even though there's a security guard. So I'm thinking about, for that film, what is shown and how a matrix of vision kind of works. Also, what is not shown. So there's a lot of blackness and darkness. So Kelly Reichardt, in many ways, kind of obfuscates our access to vision, particularly when the main protagonist is trying to hide the paintings as well. We really only see blackness and we see a very sketchy outline of the characters and their own action. So I'm thinking about that in terms of what is shown clearly, what is not shown, and how Kelly Reichardt gives us access to the film itself and the characters and the theft. I link that, thinking about newer and older film, I link that back to Robert Bresson's Pickpocket as well. So I begin the film by doing an analysis of both of those films, pointing to similarities in the way that, the characters hold our gaze, or characters look towards the camera, supposedly giving us intimate access to them, while outside of the frame, all of this kind of criminal, basically, activity is happening. So thinking about what's shown in the frame, but what's beyond the ability of our perception as well. So thinking about that. And actually, it's also a book then that begins with those examples and then looks at the elements that shape vision. As I mentioned, fire, that's really important. But also thinking about light as well, and light obviously as so crucial to cinema. But when I'm thinking about light and air, I'm writing about films or experiments with films like Alexander McCall's Light, uh, Light Dissecting a Cone, which is really just a projection of light that he made in the 1970s. Lots of experiments with projected light as well. I'm also writing in terms of light and air. I'm writing about the film Wind, early Hollywood film by Victor Seastrom that is really about, kind of animating and showing the presence of wind, the impact of wind on a community as well. That one has Lillian Gish in it as the star. So I'm connecting early film with more contemporary examples. I'm interested in elements and how elements were really at the kind of center of all of this kind of uh, early thought and conceptualizations and proposals around the history of optics and how we understand seeing.
It sounds like a great project. Tell us, if you would, were there things you discovered that surprised you?
There were so many things I discovered that were an absolute surprise. Um, The writing around fire really surprised me as
Hmm.
well,
Hmm.
because it's not really something that seems possible or logical. Reading Bachelard's work on fire as well, the psychoanalysis of fire, but then thinking about how early theorists imagined fire inside, inside the eye, how they imagined that fire actually shaped the kind of liquid and flesh of the eyeball, how it shaped the iris, and their proposals that fire was seen to be really kind of central to how we see. So that was always surprising for me. But then when I started to think about how fire works on film, I was kind of interested in making that connection to film, where fire has often been seen to kind of present limitations for the cinema. So films like Two Lane Blacktop that really just, end really in fire, as the fire just kind of, seems to, inflame really the celluloid. There's a scene in that where the fire just engulfs the film. Um, Films like Herzog's films in the oil fields, where fire really just dominates the aesthetic. But what was surprising was also the way that fire, on one hand, fire and light, are so central to film, but film has a real difficulty, I think, in registering fire as well. So the light of fire on film is sometimes too much, sometimes too bright, sometimes outside of the capacity of, film to really, and the filmmaker to really, to be able to register it. So it's almost the same thing of kind of, the intensity of looking into fire as well. So film has, for film, fire really kind of illuminates its limitations as well. Also interested in fire and protest, and that's outside of the cinema. There's been a little bit written on, fire as a form of protest for, unfortunately, cinemas that have been set alight as a form of protest when they're showing a film. Um, and then also the important fact of fire being such a key element of early cinema, but that early films were often set alight inadvertently due to the intensity of the light in projection. So in that way, cinema has a very difficult time with intense light and heat and fire as well. Can't withstand it really.
Could you tell us a little bit about the Islamic element to your work that you mentioned a couple of times?
Yes. So I think, and I'm really happy to write about the Greek mythology and the classical Greek philosophy. But there's, I think, less well known kind of theories of vision that emerge from the Islamic Golden Age, theorists who did do translation of classical Greek philosophy, who were also translating and then proposing additional elements and new elements as well. So Al-Kindi is one of those Islamic theorists who, writes about and thinks about geometry and thinks about vision and geometry as well. So his work is really important in thinking about and maybe negotiating what a lot of the writers on early optical thought are thinking about, and that is the idea of intromission or extramission, whether we see because of light that is radiating from our eyes, or whether it's the opposite, that
Mhm.
objects are radiating light back at our eyes. So writers like Al-Kindi are writing about that. And there are other writers who are writing on ideas of the visual spirit, thinking about how what we see doesn't necessarily come from a kind of internal, biological or physiological perspective, but that vision is created external to us in the air that surrounds us as well. So, and the Islamic theorists were also very interested in stellar light and solar light. The early visual acuity tests were done using two stars in the sky and whether the person can see the difference, the space between those stars was an early test of visual acuity. So that, of course, all of these writers were really instrumental and really influential in the development of how we see and how we understand vision, but also how we measure visual acuity too. So the Islamic theorists as a kind of precursors for the Snellen tests that we all read when we're trying to work out, what level of eyesight we have, what our visual acuity is without any technology, without glasses, without contact lenses, without any lenses too. So their work was really instrumental, and I thought it was really important to foreground the work that
Mhm.
they've done as well.
Asking a personal question,
Yeah,
vision when you were growing up, was that a big thing for you?
huge. Um, for me, but also for my family as well.
Hmm.
Uh, actually, uh, in the preface to this book, I write about a print that I have on my wall, and it's a print called "Salt on Mina Mina" by Dorothy Napangadi, who's was an indigenous artist working on Walpiri land in central Australia. It's an amazing print that I really love. It's a lino cut, and it's some kind of wavy grids of dots. And I look at it every day. I did some research when I was buying her work as well. And I was very interested to know that what she's doing is collecting a map of the land, of her land that she was, her family was dispossessed of as well. So um, she's collecting a map, a kind of mind map. It's almost an aerial view without actually seeing it from a distance above. She's collecting this map of the salt marshes that she was walking through, but it's more than a map, it's a representation of women dancing, the women's dancing ceremony as well. So I'm interested in that, and I have that in my home.
Mm.
And I'm thinking also about um, an ancestor of mine who was a settler here in Victoria, but she was up on Yorta Yorta land, up on the north of Victoria. That's actually just beyond the areas that are currently burning. But she was one of the early settlers who was actually blind, and there was a newspaper story about her having become lost in the real, bushland,
Mm.
having no access to vision, no access to that deep understanding of the land that Dorothy, has and represents on
Mhm.
the in her throughout her artwork. So there's that interrelationship, that kind of connection, that contrast, unfortunately. Um, but yes, there's a personal connection as well, where my eyesight is anything but perfect, um, deeply problematic. And yes, I always use, from the age of about 5, have always used technology to be able to actually see. So my experience is definitely informing this book, but I'm moving in all different directions as well.
It sounds like it. Thank you for sharing that with us. You mentioned earlier a book of film history that you wrote. Could you tell us a wee bit about that? The one that goes, as they say in baseball commentary, back, back, back.
Yes, this is 2019, and this is From Melies to New Media, Spectral Projections. Um, this emerged as, as a way of thinking about connecting contemporary cinema to early film and also raising the profile and reminding people, scholars, anyone who's interested, of the importance of early cinema. So the work on detour and the Q marks that I mentioned
Mm.
earlier
Hmm.
is the very start of that. I've also written about uh, as you might imagine, George Méliès and Trip to the Moon. So I have a whole chapter on Trip to the Moon. I saw that when I was in Bologna at the Ritrovato Film Festival in I think 2019, 2018, when it was first shown reconstructed as well, and also discovered. So I've been teaching for a little bit, quite a while now, but whenever we taught Trip to the Moon, we would always teach the incomplete version,
Mm.
and we didn't realize it was incomplete, even though it had no final titles. It was always black and white. It was, it was missing quite a significant amount as well. When I saw that in Bologna, um, revised, remade, digitized, cleaned up, I was really inspired to do some more research thinking about digital processes and, of course, all of the kind of ethics around remaking early cinema. So I wrote that the version that we saw that was shown at Ritrovato was color. It was wild. It was amazing. It was complete as we know. It was digitized, but the process there was a process where instead of the young 15-year-old girls who actually hand painted Melia's films, some of the films that were going to be, sold and exported, instead of those girls with, very clear visual acuity who probably didn't retain it as well because of their intricate work.
Mm.
Instead of those, now we have a version that's been worked on with digital tools. But the way that Lobster Films remade this film was to kind of recreate similar kind of conditions of painting, hand painting, and recreating, revising, cleaning up the film using digital tools. So they were very aware of the earlier processes
Mm.
and wanting to be as faithful as they could possibly be with these new tools in remaking it. So I wrote about the history of that reconstruction, the history of the film, and its more recent history. I wrote about new ways of seeing film in galleries.
Mhm.
So the idea of exhibiting, partial fragments or fragments of films in places like the Pompidou, who had an amazing film exhibition. And I also finished that book by returning to Muybridge and writing about his work in early photography that obviously led to the development of the moving image. But what I wanted to do there in that final chapter is not only connect to a new app that allowed everybody to make films in the style of Muybridge, but also to show that during his experiments in photography and
Mm.
early film,
Mhm.
that he was, retouching and remaking and revising photography. So there's not necessarily a sense of kind of, uh, I don't know, kind of purity about his films because he was always actually using paint to paint over the final photograph to, make the blacks blacker and to, to kind of recast these photographs in some ways. So I guess what I was trying to do is to return to early cinema to show that the process of kind of visual manipulation is absolutely not new.
That makes me ask you about pedagogy. You mentioned teaching en passant. When you've got a class of however many, 30, 150, I don't know, eager beavers, are they interested in this? Do you have to sell it?
I do have to sell it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and in a couple of months, I'll have a class of 350.
Okay,
And
350.
yeah,
Wow. Pardon me for
yeah.
living.
No, no, no. It's just, well, I teach first year as well, so it's really relevant.
Right.
And yes, first year, first week, first day of, their university career. So they come with a huge spirit, though often some are shopping, of course,
Hmm.
and some are really, very connected and eager, and they're amazing. They're all amazing. Um, but I do have to sell it in a way that often or sometimes students have not seen a black and white film. Sometimes films not necessarily trip to the moon because it's really short, it's dynamic. I think it's engaging. It does hold the frame for a long time. So the way that I think about kind of selling it and certainly teaching it is to provide the kind of context that I think the students might need. So I would teach that. I'll teach The Wind, which is an amazing film, but students will not have seen very much, it's rare for a student to have seen that. So I try and give them as much interesting context information as possible before, not in a way of telling them how to watch it, just what to look for. And so kind of directing them in that way opens it up to them. And then I will do things like look for that kind of MyBridge app, which is called the MyBridgeizer, where students
The
can
My
do it
Bridgizer. I
themselves.
love it.
Yeah, it was a page gallery app. So I'm not sure if it's still supported, but it was a really great one in allowing students to use their phone to make films in the style of MyBridge too.
No, I appreciate that because I had a girlfriend once who wouldn't watch My Man Godfrey or Hitchcock's The 39 Steps because they were in black and white and that wasn't real, in inverted commas. Unfortunately, this made me fall more and more in love with her. But
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I mean, I didn't fall out of love with My Man Godfrey or The 39 Steps.
Yeah.
In any event, there are some interesting, more, in inverted commas, popular contemporary subjects you've written about. um, and edited people on. And this includes that, again, this might connect to the Greeks, I don't know, but the superhero.
Yes.
And superhero is something that comes and goes. A few years ago, it was said to have ended its run with Hollywood, but it's hard to kill off. Tell us,
Absolutely.
tell us about you and the superhero. When you were a girl
Um,
wearing very thick glasses, were you reading Marvel comics?
I wasn't. I wasn't. But I was interested always in characters and film allowing us to kind of imagine ourselves as characters who were,
Mm,
able to fly, able to do superhuman things. So always interested in the ideal. And maybe this is why they remain so popular as well, that they still perpetuate that possibility, maybe not so much now, but of not necessarily the great savior, but the ability for a human to transform
mm,
into
mm.
um, another form. So When I was writing on the superhero, though, I was also writing on early film. So I was writing on films like Judex,
Hmm.
um, always returning to the earlier versions rather than the more contemporary versions as well. This was also part of a broader project that I did with colleagues who were they were the colleagues that were writing on the really kind of popular, superhero
Aha,
film.
yeah.
That yeah, my role in that was a very supportive role in that project, creating uh, creating uh, edited anthologies, supporting conferences. And I also had the potential to, as part of that project, we wrote and published work, but we did some creative work as well. And that was to create a kind of map of superheroes in Melbourne. So a photographer friend of mine and I went out and took photographs of spaces in Melbourne that usually had, superhero references.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
and graffiti on walls, artworks as well, spaces like even though Houdini is not a superhero, he did come to Melbourne and throw himself off the Princess Bridge into the Yarra, kind of chained up and inside a kind of some sort of crazy vessel. So we're able to kind of identify spaces in Melbourne, map them, and provide images around that kind of superhero narrative that, are in the hidden spaces of Melbourne.
there are lots and lots and lots of Mexicans who are without papers working in the United States who dress up as superheroes in their jobs in order to intimidate the authorities.
I love it and
So,
I hope it works.
yeah, well, it is pretty amazing. Um, there are quite a lot of Spider-Men who work construction.
Yeah, would be incredible to see.
Well, they've been photographed, lots of them, by artists over the years, and it is an astonishing thing to do. One of the things that seems to have changed a bit about superheroes, though I'm far from an expert, is that there are more women who get to be superheroes. Is that true, do you think?
That's absolutely true as well. And, Wonder Woman was central to that and the
Right. Yeah.
reimagination of Wonder Woman, of course.
Mm, mm,
But yes, there are many more women superheroes. There's many more superheroes with kind of a range of, abilities as well. So
mm, mhm,
um, very interesting how all of that has kind of come together and really expanded out. It certainly needed
mm,
to be
mm.
a little bit more inclusive. But this is certainly one of the more positive aspects, I think, of the superhero. Um, yeah, and there was the critique of the superhero movie that they were just being made and remade as proven narratives or proven box office
Mm,
successes.
mhm, mhm.
So I guess the superheroes are navigating both of those things, you know, the commercial imperative, but at the same time also wanting to expand out and be a little bit more inclusive, be a bit more contemporary as well.
On the question of gender, I wanted to ask you about a couple of very interesting pieces of yours I've read.
Yeah.
Because of where I live, I don't have access to most of your work, so I'm flying rather blind here. But these things, along with some others I have read, and they're about very different forms of US filmmaking femininity. Uh, one form of which probably all your 350 students will have some interest in, and that's Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
The other, a smaller subset will have interested in, but will become very dedicated, and that's Maya Deren. I wondered, who would you rather be?
Maya Deren in a heartbeat.
She did live a little bit longer, but they died at almost exactly the same time.
Yeah, Ah, yeah,
So
yeah.
Maya Deren in a heartbeat. Why is that?
Well, I think that she had more freedom to
Hmm.
be creative. You know,
Hmm.
she starred in her own films, but she also made her films. And I know that she was making them with her husband at the time as well. Um, but I just think that she had a life that included the ability to do all of those things. She had a master's degree in English. Uh, Symbolist poetry she studied. She was a dancer, a choreographer, a filmmaker. She was also an entrepreneur and real self-starter as well. There's that famous line that the films that she made are on, the budget that Hollywood would, assign to lipstick. So she was really just self-directed, self-made, self-determined as well, did
Mm.
her own, she exhibited her films herself, talked about them at universities, played them on white walls, projected them onto white walls. So I think I would much prefer to be Maya Deren. And of course, there's the voodoo work as well, which is just fascinating. Yeah, her work in Haiti and her, association with voodoo as well. So that idea of really exploring a whole tradition of voodoo where she was able to then, experience the idea of, multiple personas, which is what we see in her films as
Mm.
well.
Mm. Do you teach her work at all, ever?
I I do for first year. Um,
No.
Uh, but when I do it, because I teach meshes in the afternoon, which is about 20 minutes, I will show a more contemporary film as well. So
Yeah.
as a way of, connecting up for students too. If I was teaching at level 4 in honours or during the third year, then I would teach Maya Deren as well, on her own, if
On
you know
her
what I
own.
mean.
Do you
Yeah.
find any kind of gender difference in terms of responses to her amongst the students?
Um, just that she's hugely popular with women in the classroom. Yeah. And maybe because of that real kind of self-determination,
Yeah,
perhaps.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, maybe there are other things at play there. She's been important for me as well.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And yeah, and for a whole, all so many other women academics and, creators as well. Blonde is different. Now, I've taught Blonde in its, uh, the film that came out just recently on Marilyn Monroe. I taught that a couple of years ago for first year. First year students had difficulty with it in that I think they didn't. Uh, I think they just found it quite long and difficult to watch. They didn't, it was harder to kind of get them to engage with that film as well. It's really interesting from my point of view, I think, thinking about, you know, the gaze, looking power dynamics, um, the idea of remaking, a kind of biopic based on a book, not necessarily on Marilyn Monroe's life. Uh, the second link is to Marilyn Monroe's life. The first link is to a book on her. So I think for me, it's interesting because of everything that I talked about around Maya Deren, power dynamics, and but it's also interesting in terms of the way that early photography and film cultures are used and shown and kind of replicated as well. So when I wrote on that, I wrote on those, the way that those flash cameras were used,
Yes.
the ones that had the exploding flash bulb. Do you remember those?
Sure, I do indeed.
And also the way that the film was trying to kind of replicate the technologies, the aesthetic of the technologies that were around while Marilyn Monroe was, in Hollywood making film as well.
she and Maya Deren have something in common apart from dying not very far distant from one another, and that is President Kennedy, because, of course, Marilyn serenaded the president memorably,
She did.
and Maya had the same doctor prescribing her magic drugs as the president.
I did not know that. Mm.
I think I know this to be true. I could be making it up, but it sounds good. It could be an essay question. What is
Yes.
the inexorable link between Maya Deren and Marilyn Monroe? And I think Marilyn Monroe's first husband was an Australian, I think. There's some Australian dude in there.
Mm.
I always think the thing to get people interested in her is, in terms of this question of the gaze,
Yeah.
two moments in Niagara.
Yes.
One, when she says to Joseph Cotton, light me up, when she's asking him to light her cigarette, when she's gotten out of a shower and just has
Yeah.
the towel on, and he's insanely jealous and all the rest of it. But the other is when she walks away from the camera in a red dress. And
Yes.
it's a long take, and it's astonishing because her body almost disappears from having been in close up. I can't think of anything like it in conventional Hollywood, where so much time is taken for her body to be seen from behind, almost to the point of disappearance.
That's right. Yes,
Have
that's
I got
right.
that right? It's a memory from a long time ago.
Yes, you've got it right. And also, I think that, and I've forgotten who's the author of this article, but there is an article on that dress and
Oh,
on
is
that.
there? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, there is.
Ah,
Um, I've never shown Niagara to students, but I probably should. And I think that I haven't shown it because not so long ago, I used to teach a subject called the 1950s film, which was on obviously cinema in the 1950s.
mm,
But
mm.
we did, we did Marilyn Monroe, but as a way of kind of getting in there, I think we were interested in looking at some of the kind of bigger hits. But I always talked about Niagara as well as a film that's a little bit more noir as well
Sure. Well, I
than
think it's interesting in terms of domestic violence.
yes,
And feminine solidarity, because Jean Peters is always speaking up for her and her memory, as I recall,
yes,
and wanting
yes,
the salvation, at least, of her memory and justice for her. So
yes,
I think
yes,
that's one of the things that's very contemporary about it, whilst
yes,
also connecting to noir, even though it's got such astonishing use of color. Anyway,
that's
sorry, I'm
no,
ranting about something that interests me. It just connects tangentially with what you were doing.
yeah,
That's another figure where I'm thinking maybe she speaks today more to girls and boys,
yes,
because she has become a feminist icon. I think it's fair to say, and something of a queer icon as well in her struggles in terms of identity, subjectivity, acceptance, and the question of surface and reality in some kind of dialectic. I think that's probably right to say.
I think so too. And also, I mean, whilst I say that I would be Mayor Deren in a heartbeat, we don't want to kind of discount that Marilyn was also involved in film production as well. That
Mhm.
there was an element of her so short career where she was able to produce films and begin to work in that space as well. So there's an element where she is obviously taking control or obviously shifting things to be able to, produce as well.
The
So,
Conde Duque Museum Library in Madrid recently had a very big international show about her incarnation in different forms in different countries. And it really tried to allow for vulnerability and victimhood alongside power and self-determination in the
Yes.
interpretations it gave of these different incarnations. It was very striking, I think.
Yeah. And really important to acknowledge, I think, all of the facets,
Yeah.
Um, there is a dominant narrative, of course, but so much more. And still, research that is yet to be done
Mm.
on Monroe too. So really kind of, a rich source for additional research and maybe even additional research now in the digital age where things are, a lot of the archive would be accessible, but would also be, well, it may allow for some sort of, creative kind of project that may use some of the images in ways that, certainly when I was a student, it was kind of even hard to, put an image in an essay. So I think students actually have a lot of resources now. Is a real kind of digital humanities opportunity for students to create new ways of seeing, the impact of stars like Marilyn, the impact of, creative stars as well, like Maya Deren.
Prof, I have one more question for you, if I may. And when you've
Mm.
answered that, I'd like to give you the opportunity to add anything you wish. That could take the form of going back over terrain we've covered, where you want to include something else, or something entirely new. Does that sound okay as a means of bringing things to a conclusion?
Perfect.
So, my last question derives in part from what you were just saying about resources. And I wondered if you might meditate for us a wee bit on film history. Over the last decades, there have been terms used like new film history, and as you mentioned, digital humanities. Where's film history been and where is it now and where's it going, is my query. Your starter
It
for 10.
well, I think it's probably been hidden, even in perhaps our own lifetimes. So the example of, trip to the moon, incomplete,
Mm,
black and white, in fragments. So it has been hidden. Where it is now, I think, is at a place where there's much more access, but we also know that the idea of complete access is an absolute illusion as
mhm,
well, meaning that it's all not available online and on the
mm,
internet. And where it's going in the future, I think, is potentially, really an open possibility where hopefully all of those things will come together, the access that we have now, but the critical evaluation of the access that we have now that would see someone like perhaps Marilyn Monroe in a particular way, or might leave out, a lot of her narrative.
mm,
So maybe the future is at the illumination of elements that were hidden in the past, the recuperation of a broader multidimensional narrative, and also potentially the kind of creative approach to developing new film histories. So I've been really happy to work with some PhD scholars who have been creating projects that look at things like dance archives or look at, archives of Balinese dance from the 1930s and write the history of that archive, but
mm,
then also to bring it into connection with a lot of the digital tools that would allow for a kind of reading of the body and the face and the performance of that dance, using actually some of the technologies that Marie would have used making early films. So those kind of dot points that measure and register movement as well. So actually, it's what film history is doing, new film history, um, media archaeology, I would say, is opening up to the use of new digital tools to tell a story with new elements that might have been previously been hidden.
Sounds exciting. And to conclude, are there things you'd like to add?
Um, Not really. I think we covered a lot. I want to say thank you for allowing me to talk about particularly also my new work
Mm, mm.
on, theories of vision in the cinema. Some of the other chapters that I didn't mention when we were talking about that include work on films like Wavelength, which you will have seen, experienced. And I'm writing about the experience of projecting wavelength now, but also seeing wavelength in its other forms. One that was made by Snow while he was alive, which was a compression of it into, I think, 8 minutes. And then, yeah, and that one was distributed on DVD by Snow. But then another version, which is called, Wavelength for people who don't have the time, which is available on YouTube online, which is, a whole other experience as well, an experience of sound and image that is of a different sort of intensity as well. So really that chapter is about looking and experiencing early films, what we have access to and what we don't. And another chapter that I wanted to mention is a chapter on mechanical vision and time lapse. So I've written on an early scientific time lapse film called The Birth of a Flower. And I've written on a range of associated kind of time lapse films, thinking about how technology both allows for these new visions, and that is a vision of something that we wouldn't be able to actually see with our naked eye if we were watching the blooming of a flower or the dying of a flower as well. The way that film is able to, distinctly able to kind of register a lot of these kind of visions that we ordinarily wouldn't be able to see in
Right.
our normal experience of time.
When does the book come out? Do we know?
We think this year, I'm really 90% finished.
Right.
And yeah, I'm lucky to have had that sabbatical to be able to bring it all together. Obviously, I'm very interested in the concepts and the ideas and the historical framework, but also the examples as well. And I guess, underneath maybe all that I've written, when you emailed me to us to talk about what I've been doing in my research, I was trying to think about, how would I define it? But it's really kind
Mm,
of, as you would know, hard to kind of encapsulate what you do in a couple of sentences. But I think at the heart of what I've always done from early work on Deren through that, work on superheroes into film history and new media, digital humanities is always kind of uh, develop and maintain a really deep connection with the film, with the text,
mhm.
and with the materials as well. So the work that I've done recently on poisons and the cinema with the chapter on bigger than life is an example of that. That I guess in my work I've tried to stay very attentive to. Laura Marks writes about this as well, the idea of like really kind of seeing the work, trying to see the work, trying to get up close to the work. She talks about, uh, feeling it, touching it. But the way that I've written, I think, on screen-based work, on early film, on contemporary film is a way where I'm, deeply connected to it, but I have a real proximity, and it might have to do with, um, issues with eyesight and having to get up close to actually see it. I don't
Well,
know.
thank you so much, Prof, for being with us. It's been terrific. Really appreciated it. And please come back to the pod when the book comes out. Maybe we should have a wee panel put together with some of your interlocutors.
That would be incredible, Toby, and I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Happy days.